You're listening to Beyond the Measure, episode 22. Listen as I, a young choir director, and my husband, a young composer, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Measure. We have another wonderful guest on our show today, but before I introduce her, my name is Christian, and I'm here with my beautiful co-host,
Kara.
And as said before, we have a wonderful guest on our show today, another person with an orchestra background that we're very excited to have on the show. We have Miss Darcy Radcliffe. Thank you so much.
Yes, I love being here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, of course. We're excited to have you. We've heard a lot about you from around town. We've heard from Abigail Payne, and who's a friend of yours and friend of ours, and a lot of other people around town that you know what you're doing. You've done a lot of good stuff around town and around the world, as I'm sure we'll hear about here in a little while. But could you just start by telling us what you've done in Abilene recently, the past few years, and kind of where you're at now?
Okay, so I have been the head orchestra director at Abilene High School and Cooper High School for the last 21 years. I have a degree from Hardin-Simmons University in violin performance, and I had said I do not want to be a teacher. And I was asked, yes, my father was the orchestra director at Cooper High School before me for 20 years. So combined, he and I have taught orchestra in Abilene for 41 years.
Wow.
Combined.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool, actually. But I didn't want to teach, and I was very passionate, though, about changing the world. And I wanted to make an impact. And I was asked to come in and sub for the orchestra director at Abilene High for 2 weeks. And I had a moment. I stood on the podium and I felt like, there was a beam of sunshine down on me and the angels were singing and there was, like, this is the next thing that you should do with your life. This is the next right thing. So when that job opened the next year, I was asked to take that position, and that was kind of the beginning of my career in education. And I just recently resigned from teaching in Abilene ISD, but I just completed 21 years of teaching orchestra at Abilene High and Cooper High School at the same time.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And
Yeah.
so that's a really good kind of good general description of kind of where you're at now. Would you mind telling us, and you can go as specific or as general as you want, kind of how you just came to really fall in love with music to begin with, and with violin, and kind of what led you to pursuing music, going into college and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, my family was a very musical family. My grandfather actually taught voice at Hardin-Simmons, and then my dad's a musician. And, you just start to kind of ask yourself, what is it that I'm really good at? And I started studying violin as a young child, and you kind of fall in love with it and out of love with it as you grow up. And there were several times where I had to recommit myself to, this is what I love to do. I was also dancing quite a bit. I studied ballet for many years, studied with Marge Bauckham. And I actually spent a year touring as a dancer for a year, which made me really recommit to music. It was like, okay, I loved that year. I'll never, it was one of the best years of my life, but it did help me kind of refocus my love for music. But I'm the oldest of 6 children. All of my siblings are musical. They all studied instruments and voice and stuff. And so it was just kind of in the water, just being a part of a musical family definitely pointed me towards that direction of pursuing music.
Cool. That's awesome. And so you came to Hardin-Simmons and you said violin performance, and then you had the moment, and then you'd been at basically, so have you just been at like Abilene High and Cooper all that time?
Is right after I finished college.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Very
I just
cool.
kind of backed into it. It wasn't something that I thought I'm going to go be a teacher at all.
Yeah.
I was just filling a need. And just went, actually, I really love this. And so I went and got certified to teach and went that route after I got hired. But it was very different on that side of the podium than it was sitting in the seat as a student, and I just saw things very differently. And I really fell in love with the creative side of it, being able to have some direction with what we did and didn't do. And then just also being able to make an impact with that next generation still is very appealing to me, and I consider it very much an honor to have done what I just finished doing.
Yeah, that's super cool. That's a big accomplishment for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Kara, you're on year 2. You're almost there.
Getting there. Year 2.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. Well, it's a noble profession. I think teaching is a very worthy thing, and I wish our society valued it more highly than it does at large, because there's nothing easy about it.
Yeah.
And, I hate that those that can't teach. That is baloney.
I know.
Because teaching is very, very challenging.
Oh, of course.
I mean, there's no 2 days the same. There are no 2 hours the same. You really can't have a bad day. I mean, you have to go in and give it your best, and then just the stakes are so high too, and so I just admire anyone who's teaching. I think it's just an amazing job.
And I think it's so easy to go into music because you're really passionate about it, which is good. But especially when it comes to teaching, but really anything you're passionate about, if you want to do it as your job, you got to have more than passion. You need to be able to do the things that you're not passionate about so that you can still do that thing.
Right. Yeah. It takes a lot of commitment.
Yeah. Well, so you have a really kind of unique experience as an educator, because you've been able, you're really more of an innovator, and you've been able to create a lot of fun experiences, more unique experiences for students. And we were kind of talking about those beforehand, before we started the interview. So would you mind telling us a little bit about this pretty unique and cool string group that you created during your time in Abilene?
I created a group called Revolution Strings, and it started off pretty much just as a fiddle group. And it was created as a way to solve a problem. So when I was first hired at Abilene High, I taught at Abilene High a year before I started teaching at Cooper. There were very few students in the orchestra program at Abilene High, like 22 kids, I think, is what it was. And no one was motivated. No one wanted to get their instruments out of their case. And yet, we had region orchestra auditions coming up, and these etudes were super intimidating. Very few kids were studying privately. And it was just like, what's the point? Why do I want to? It was just so over their heads. And I also had the sense that the students felt overlooked. The orchestra is not tied to football. Yeah. Orchestra is really not tied to a lot of churches. And in Abilene, church and football are both really big deals.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you had these students that were just playing there were some good players in this group, but nobody knew it. And then we would have an orchestra concert. Hardly anyone ever came. And the orchestra concerts would be in this huge auditorium that seated, like 1,800 people or something. And you'd have your 22 kids on stage and hardly anyone in the audience. And it was really kind of a downer, And so I just thought, well, what can I do? What can be done? What will get these kids wanting to play their instrument? And so I started looking around and found some Celtic reels and some fiddle tunes, some Texas hoedowns. And so we just started, anybody that wants to come after school, we're going to do this 3 days a week. And so we did that for about a semester. And then we started to kind of sort out those who really, really found their identity with orchestra and really, really wanted it to work. And so the second semester that I taught, we created more formal group. And by the end of the semester, we went and played at an elementary school, and we went and played at, retirement home. And it really started to catch on. Well, the next year I was hired at Cooper. And so I put both schools together and auditioned kids to be in this group. And then things really started to take off then, because now we had double the talent. And we were able to do more, right? And I was able to do more because I had a better lay of the land. I was a new teacher, right? And so we just kept playing. And things really began to become more fun. There was more interaction between the students. There was more social connection with them as well. And people knew about them on campus. And so we were getting asked to play for the homecoming thing, and orchestra's going to play for homecoming, and we amplified the instruments as well. That was also a game changer.
Oh yeah.
But the biggest turning point happened, I think it was 2006 or the fall of 2005. I was conducting at Cooper, I'll never forget, in the morning, and I was conducting Tchaikovsky's Serenade for Strings, and the phone rang.
As it does.
As it does. And I thought, this is when you could trust phone calls, Yeah. So it was on my cell phone, and I was like, who is calling my cell phone? And it was a different area code. And so I answered the phone, with the kids sitting right in front of me. And it was a producer from Boston, Massachusetts, representing the National Public Radio show called From the Top. And they said, we've heard about your group, and we want to know if you'd be interested in having them perform on National Public Radio.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I mean, by this point, I had been teaching like 4 or 5 years, not very long.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, my little group of fledgling teenagers are going to be put on National Public Radio.
Yeah.
You want to talk about starting to listen to everything that you do differently. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Are we a little flat? Oh, hang on. Just everything gets scrutinized, which made me a much better teacher, by the way. But that was the big turning point when all of a sudden we were on National Public Radio.
Yeah. Wow.
And then things really started to take off after that. And since that time, we have performed all over the place. We've recorded 2 albums. We've made a handful of music videos, like professional quality, studio quality videos. We have performed for several state conventions, like the Texas Association of Secondary School Principals. We've performed at the Texas Music Educators Association convention multiple times, including just this last February when we played for their opening session, which was a thrill. It was a really big thrill at the Lila Cockrell Theater. We've played for the National Association of Secondary School Principals. We've played for the National School Board Convention in Nashville. We've played at the Grand Ole Opry. We've worked with, and just a host of other like big events like that. We've worked with a lot of artists as well, and that's a whole nother topic, but we've brought in guests to come and perform with our orchestras. We've brought in Mark O'Connor. He's come to Abilene 3 times, and he's a Grammy Award-winning composer and violinist and guitar player. I mean, he's amazing. We've brought in Asleep at the Wheel and Riders in the Sky and Alistair Fraser and Natalie Haas and Mark Preston from the Letterman and the Quaby Sisters and the Hot Club of Cowtown. I mean, just this long list of artists and that's been really cool too, because that's benefited everybody in the program and the community. It's enriched our community. We've toured as well, China, the country of China, all over the country, that country. We've toured Spain, France, England, and Scotland. And then we were invited to tour all over Canada in celebration of their 150th birthday.
Wow.
And that's it's been a really big thrill to go, to start off with, we're 22 kids and nobody even knows we're here.
Yeah.
And it was just like, how can we motivate these students and give them a voice, give them some agency, and then to see what it turned into has been just really thrilling, and I have learned so much along the way. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
that's like I mean, it's kind of like a miracle in a way when you think about it, but you've obviously put in so much work and time and dedication into it that you just saw all that hard work pay off.
Yeah.
I think what's just really cool about that story is that you saw a need and you thought, okay, well, what we're currently doing isn't working, right?
Right.
Or at least not nearly as good as something else could.
Yeah.
And you thought of a creative way to kind of bring some enthusiasm into that. And I think, I would imagine it's so easy, especially, we were just talking about how hard it is to, as a teacher, to be handling all these tasks you are and to have that kind of issue. And it can be so hard to just say to yourself, well, I guess that's just the way it is. Right.
Right.
Without really doing anything to try to
And that's the
fix
temptation.
That.
I think a lot of times teachers feel like they don't have any agency or autonomy. And there's that sense of, well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes there isn't anything you can do about it. But one thing I always would say to myself is, if I'm bored, then my students are probably bored. Something needs to change. If I'm bored, then it doesn't have to be a big change. It doesn't have to be radical. But there needs to be another approach. Something else needs to be introduced, because this should be fun. It should be.
Yeah.
Education, all education, should have an element of fun and reward, and right. It's going to be challenging. Playing a stringed instrument is very challenging, right?
Yeah.
But there also should be some fun attached to it. And so, for me, what I've always said with my students is getting on the stage and performing and doing our best. That's the most fun we can have, right? And so when you start fostering that mindset, let's get out there and let's go play. Let's get out there and let's do music. Not, well, we have to go play this and then we'll be done. Not that approach.
Yeah.
But the approach of, you get to pull an instrument out of your case today.
Get to. Yep.
You get to play in front of an audience of 1 or in front of an audience of 10,000. But you get to do it. What can you do today to make your performance more alive and more active or different than what you did before? So yeah, it always, for me, it would come back to, I'm bored. Okay, so if I'm bored, what can we do differently? Because I'm not the only one in this room. I'm probably not the only one feeling this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were telling us before this that you've gotten a lot of questions about it. Maybe you can kind of address those here in a minute on how you went about doing that specifically. The literal steps you took towards that. But I just had one main question. Well, first of all, I should outline this image. I've seen like videos of y'all on on Facebook and YouTube and everything, and it's, I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's essentially, it's these students that they're all standing up and they're playing their instruments, and it's, you're really fun, upbeat music most of the time, and they're not like marching around, but they're moving, right?
Yeah,
they're kind of
interacting.
Exactly. They're displaying that energy, and and so my first really only question for me is, I noticed that the cello players are are holding their instrument, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
Well, we've had a lot of iterations of that over the years. That's one thing that's constantly evolving, is our role of the cellist. When I first started teaching, I didn't have any cellists in the group.
Okay.
And it was just fiddles. But as the interest has grown, and students graduate and you get new students in and stuff, and I'm always tailoring what we're doing to who it is that's in the group. Like our programming and everything, I adjust to the talent that's sitting in front of me, and I get a lot of inspiration from my students. But we eventually, our most recent iteration has been using the block strap, and that was created by a cellist by the name of Mike Block. He teaches up at Berklee School of Music in Boston, and it's basically a strap that straps to your instrument and in more than one place, right? So it's good and stable, and then up against you. And so you're kind of strapped in, so that instrument is on you. It's not going to fall off, even if your hands are not holding it.
Wow, that's so interesting.
It gives the cellist some mobility, so they're again not stuck in the back sitting in a chair. They're up interacting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
that was just something I wanted to ask about specifically. I'd never really seen that before. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Marching orchestra can be a thing.
This is true.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
Cool.
But a lot of people do ask me about programming.
Oh yeah.
So, as I just alluded to, I often would program according to who it is that I have in my group. That's part of the equation. Like, what is the talent level? Where are the personalities? And I really do. And I guess if people haven't seen what it is that I'm talking about, it's really kind of hard to even continue the conversation without explaining it a little bit more. But we're playing fiddle tunes, we're playing Celtic music, and we're country music and jazz, and just every style you can think of, we've done. But everybody's standing up, except for the drummer.
Yeah.
We do have a set of drums. We have electric bass, and we'll have either, just depending on the students, we'll have somebody playing piano or somebody playing guitar, depending on the talent that we have. So we have a back line, a rhythm section. And then all the violins and violas are standing, and the cellists are standing, and they have all the music memorized. And those students have anywhere, depending on the grade that they're in, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half worth of music memorized at the drop of a hat. They can play it at any time, which, I don't know a lot of college kids that can do that.
Oh, I could never.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be said about that too, but so they have it all memorized. And so we're not dancing, but we are moving around. So, you'll have soloists that will move up and they interact with each other, and they'll interact with the audience, or they'll walk down to the audience, or everybody moves at a certain beat in the music, or there's just a lot of interaction happening between musicians, and there's a lot of interaction happening between the musicians and the audience. So I try to pick music that will fit the skill that I have. And then I also am aware of where are we going to go perform. Sometimes, especially before COVID, it was, we were playing in all these small towns around Abilene. So we're playing for West Texas audience. Okay, we're playing out in Snyder, we're playing in Anson, we're playing in Coleman, we're playing in Haskell, we're playing all these little towns. Well, who's going to be there? Farmers and ranchers.
Yeah.
What do they want to hear? They want to hear Bob Wills.
Yep.
They want to hear, Faded Love and Western Swing. So San Antonio Rose and, that sort of thing. So So I make sure we have like, okay, we're going to have a set of 3 to 5 just Bob Wills country stuff because I know my audience, right?
Yep.
But then other times we're playing for a big convention like in another city, and you got to have a showstopper. Something that's going to be just really, people are just going to freak out. They can't believe what, these are high school kids, you know, they're not going to believe what they saw, and it needs to be very dynamic and in your face. So I always consider my students and their ability and what they want to play, and a lot of times they'll come to me and say, hey, can we do this? And okay, yeah, let's think about that. Or and then I'm thinking about the audience. Who are we playing for? What size event is it? And then I usually build a set list with about 5 songs that we keep all year. That's just in their back pocket. And then we rotate in and out other songs. So let's say you have spent 4 months working on one particular song, and you go play and you perform, and it doesn't go well, kind of like in college for your recital, and you have that one shot and you got nervous and it wasn't fantastic, right? We've all been there. Yeah. The pressure is immense to get it right that one time. Well, in this sort of setup, if you have a bad show, you have a bad show, you're going to get another chance to do it again. And so you spend all this time learning this music, and it's not just learning the notes, but you're learning, how can I really perform this, right? So you're working on polishing and musicality and expression and energy, not just notes and rhythms and get it done this one time and put it behind me, right? And there's enough variability in the levels, because this is, you know, freshmen through seniors, that there's going to be some stuff that's over your head as a freshman, right? That's not accessible to you right away. So there's plenty of room to grow. Yeah. And then if you have just a really dynamite group of seniors, you can, let's give you something that's harder as a group, right? So there's just a lot of flexibility in it on the teacher side, and there's a lot of ownership on the student end. The buy-in is really big because it's so challenging. But I think it does give them advantage when they are thinking about pursuing music beyond high school. They definitely have more confidence and self-awareness. And then they often, a lot of the students often speak from a microphone, so they have to get used to speaking in front of an audience as well. And often you don't see that with orchestras, right? Yeah. So there's just I think there's a lot of value to it. And again, I didn't know that when I started. Yeah. But I've come to find that to be true as we've progressed over the years. And I just really believe in it. I think it's an innovative new way to approach music education, especially for string students, that would benefit a lot of students in a lot of schools. So
yeah, I think what's so cool about that is it's kind of, so like for band you have marching band, and for choir you have show choir. But then you also, choir is just easier to just go somewhere and sing, right? But string instruments have never really, I don't think they've ever really had that much of that sort of separate, more out there, kind of in your face, fun. I mean, not that the other stuff wasn't fun, but, you know, and so that's really kind of a nice bridge of it's new and it's fresh, and it definitely appeals to, I mean, you can make it appeal to whichever audience you prefer, like you said, but it also appeals to that modern sort of, people just want energy.
Right. You know? And we talk about energy all of the time. Yeah. People often, just talk about how energetic I am, and I am energetic. And, as a teacher, and this, it who you are rubs off on your students, right? Yeah. And positive and the negative. But that's something I bring into my classroom, and it's intentional. Even if I'm feeling horrible, it doesn't matter. We've got to serve the music, and the music, good music. It can be slow, soft, a requiem. It has to be performed and undergirded by energy, or else it's not really worth doing or listening to, right? And so being able to figure out how to teach that energy. But a lot of what I was doing with Revolution Strings is just, right there in your face, energy. And it's, a lot of enthusiasm, and audiences are allowed to respond. They don't have to wait to the end. Yeah. It's like there's just an immediate interaction between you and the audience, which also string players don't often get.
For sure. I've always kind of got the impression that, like, when people think of like a classical string concert experience, to a lot of people nowadays, it doesn't sound that appealing, just because it's like you have to go into a room and you have to shut up for like an hour or whatever. And it's I think there's a lot of that idea of, and this isn't a bad thing, but just some people get turned off by it. It's solely, you have to sit and you have to listen and you have to like understand the music like that's being performed, which may or may not actually be true. What you're actually wanting is an orchestra, but a lot of people kind of have that impression. And so this is kind of an experience where it's kind of breaking that mold of what it has to be.
Right. Yeah. I think classical music can kind of feel like a club.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people feel like they don't belong in that club, or they don't want to belong in it.
Yeah.
They're not interested in it. They don't understand it. And you're right, sitting there quietly and listening to something you don't really understand. And you have to go somewhere to do that, where you could just listen to it on your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rough. And so I think, you know, again, back into the classroom, it's like, how can we innovate this? How can we make this more appealing and connect these dots? Because we want to grow another generation of classical music lovers, right? Yeah. People that believe in that. But back to this model that I've created, you know, you all think about classical music and think about the composers that are often played. And then you look at your demographic and the diversity that's in a classroom. And you go, gosh, this music, they're not playing music that represents them.
Yeah.
And again, another level of disconnect.
Yeah.
So how can we play music that they identify with, right? Yeah. That's of quality, not just something that's just fluff. That it's something that they can really sink their teeth into, that's worth listening to and worth learning and worth performing. And I think that's something else that orchestras, professional orchestras all the way down to educational orchestras, need to consider, is just the diversity of their population and the music that they're selecting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just bridging that gap. I think about kind of like what you were saying. I mean, we didn't even grow up with. I mean, we grew up with the radio and Spotify and streaming and all that stuff. And so you're going to school just as a, not even as a music student, but you're never, I mean, your teachers aren't playing, Bach and Mozart on, in the classroom while you're working, usually while you're working on stuff, and you're not listening to that in the car, and you're not like, it's just not that same type of setting anymore. And so that's kind of why there's that sort of divide coming in to that sort of experience. But what's also really nice is that you can really create music in a way that kind of fits in between those, whether it's the actual experience and how you're presenting that with that, or how you're arranging or writing music. This summer, I wrote an arrangement for string orchestra for Kara, and it was a Harry Styles song.
Oh, yeah.
And and it was from like his new album, and it's a really pretty song on its own, but I really, really enjoyed making a string version of it, but it wasn't necessarily just like a flat out like transcription of it, just the strings. Like I added so much more of that, more like string emotion and those kind of melodic lines and stuff. And it's still like the original song, like you can tell, but it's also it still kind of fits on its own, like kind of it's in its own category. And that was just really fun for me to be able to kind of have that kind of opportunity to put those things together.
Right. Yeah, that is really, really cool.
Let us take a quick break real quick so I can tell you a little bit about this podcast's primary sponsor, which is Christian Fortner Music. That's right, my own music business. This is the primary platform that I use to sell my music, and you can find it at www.christianfortner, that's Fortner, music.com. Now, you may be thinking, oh, I don't know, this guy is a young composer. Does he really know what he's doing? Well, to be honest, none of us composers really know what we're doing, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. But if you want to kind of get an idea of what my music might be like and if it might be a good fit for your ensemble, you can actually get a free copy of music from me. That's right, a free piece of music. This isn't just a study score. This is full score and parts that you can use for your ensemble to perform completely for free. And you can do that by signing up for my mailing list. So if you go to my website, Christian Fortner, that's Fortner, music.com/mailings, you can sign up for my mailing list right there, and you'll get a link in your inbox where you can select a piece of music for either choir, string orchestra, or band. And I should also mention that the choir piece, it can be either an SAB, SA, or TB version. So for any of you out there that are looking for SAB, SA, TB, specific voicings like that, then this might be a good opportunity for you. So yeah, that's about it. Again, if that's something you'd be interested in, just check it out on my website. And now we can get back to the episode. So let's assume there are some orchestra directors listening to this, and maybe they have or they haven't heard of your group, and they're like, man, it'd be really cool if I was able to do that or do something very similar to that? Like how do you recommend that a string teacher even, how do they even begin to kind of like get this sort of thing started?
Yeah, I'm working with a few directors on this very thing and from other parts of the state.
Cool.
And trying to figure out how to get started is a problem, like if you don't know what to do. So I am available. I'm consulting other directors, so people can get in touch with me and we can work out the specifics, because no two schools are the same. But I really think it goes back to what's the need that needs to be met and what is the director interested in, because it is a big commitment of time and energy. And if you don't like it, if it's not something you enjoy, it's not going to work. Right. So all those things have to come together. And as I've already mentioned in our conversation today, once I figured out what my problem was, this problem that needed to be solved, the need that needed to be met in my student body and in our community as well, and then I looked at my talent level, I thought, okay, well, let me program to meet those needs. And so I started with a small set list of about 5 songs, and we learned it and memorized it. And we didn't have a sound system to begin with. But we gradually added on from there. So you don't have to have everything when you begin. As a matter of fact, I would say get the buy-in from the students first. If you buy all this gear and don't have the buy-in from the kids, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean anything's going to happen. And you want the kids to feel, the students to feel like this is their thing too, right, for it to work. So I would say you just kind of have to really kind of think through what it is that you love, what it is that's needed, and go from there. And just start small. Start with 3 to 5 songs. Nothing that's super hard. I mean, if it's too hard, it won't work, right? So it can sound hard and be easy. So find something that is of interest to your audience, that's interest to your students, and then grow it from there. And that's what I did. I eventually, had a handbook where the kids, it's a very long handbook of the expectation that the students had. The number of we rehearsed 3 times a week after school, and that's both high schools combined. And then we would perform as gigs came up throughout the year. Students would give typically about 40 performances a year. Wow. And just depending on the time of year it was, and weekends and holidays and all of that. And then, 3 rehearsals a week after school. Wow. And so, but that's what worked for my location and my student body, and that will be different in different places. But I would just say start small and do what it is that you love.
Start
meet
small.
Meet the need.
I saw on, I think it was a screen, I think it was on Facebook, but it was a screenshot of someone had posted on Twitter, and it was like a quote, and it said, well, this is going to take more than a day. The people that built Rome. Right. Something like that. It's like, all right. There you go.
It's not something that can happen quickly. That's for sure.
Could you tell us a little bit more about, going off of that, because you said y'all got to travel all around the world and everything like that. And so there are just so many benefits to being able to do that and being in a group, such as Revolution Strings. Could you just kind of tell us a little bit about the benefits of having your students have that sort of experience that you've seen?
Well, I would say it's multifold. Is that a word?
I think so.
I mean, there's like, we were seeing changes all the way down into the middle school level from what was happening with the high school level. So when I first started teaching, there were 6 middle schools in Abilene and 2 high schools. There are now 4 middle schools in Abilene, and all of 6 middle schools and 2 high schools, there were about 230 students that were in orchestra when I first started teaching. And then before COVID, I don't know what the numbers are this fall, but before COVID, we had over 700 students. And a lot of that had to do with the enthusiasm and the quality level of our program. And people wanted to be involved in it. I think kids would look at it and go, I want to do that. I want to be like that. That's something I never considered before. I've never seen this before. I want to go be a part of it. And so students were signing up for orchestra in numbers that our school district has never seen, ever.
Wow.
So that's one thing that's happened. I would say that with the individual students that have had the opportunity to go travel, it was really, really eye-opening for me to see them play in different countries and see the responses we would get. Because, we would play around Abilene and we were well received and very appreciated. But you go into a place where fiddle is the instrument, where that is the marching band of the culture, like Scotland. People freak out about what we were playing in Scotland. I mean, they were just like, where are you all from? We played in Toulouse, France. And people were like, where's your next performance? We're going to follow you there.
Wow.
Like that kind of was like, what the heck?
That's amazing.
Well, we'll be in Paris. We played it right outside of the Royal, the Academy of Music in Paris.
Wow.
It's just, but for our students, our little West Texas kids to see that response.
Yep.
Or in China, we're playing for thousands of people in one night. I mean, these auditoriums that we were playing in had 3 balconies, packed. The places were packed. And I wouldn't say we were mobbed when we walked out of the auditoriums at the end of the night, but we had people waiting to talk to us and to take pictures with us and stuff. Well, that's not happening around here for those kids, right? So to go, what I do is of value? What?
Yeah.
I'm not just being passed by because I didn't win a game, an athletic game. And we want so badly to measure the arts all of the time.
Yes,
and it has to be so competitive and so measurable. And I'm not saying that there's not some value in having some auditions and things. I'm not saying that, but it just gets so upside down in our culture at large, and especially in the high school culture.
Yeah, win.
Yeah. And so just to take that out and go, hey, go play in front of these other audiences. And it was life-changing, as I've alluded to already, for those students. And then that just kind of passes on down to their classmates in orchestra. And those that aren't in Revolution, we still had really great orchestras. I mean, we were winning, UIL, we were straight ones every year and doing very innovative things with the orchestras as well. When we bring in these special guests, they would come in and work with the orchestras. And but again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning about I was having fun. Yeah. The students were having fun. I was learning and growing and connecting, and I was on fire by all of it. And I had a lot of energy I was getting from it and giving back to it, right? And it was all just kind of this lovely give and take, because I think as a teacher, you have to walk into a classroom with your heart, right? And there's a vulnerability that's there as a teacher, and trust that's there as a teacher. And you have to trust your students, and your students have to trust you. You have to trust that your administration's got your back and supports you, and vice versa, right? And when that trust breaks down, things don't keep flowing, right? It becomes unhealthy really quickly. And so for me, it was like, how can I stay in the game? I don't want to be a robot. I want to be somebody that comes in here giving my all every single time, because the next generation is worth it. And what is my medium? It's music. This is what I'm going to do to connect with that next generation. And I want to do it well. And I want the next generation to know what excellence is in everything, not just in music, but in how they conduct their lives and living as people with integrity. And I would just say all of these things, it's just one big thing. It's one big soup of ideas, but it all gives to itself. It all lends itself to bringing growth and life and new ideas and freedom and autonomy. And I don't know, it can be really, really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people need to hear that and hear that motivation.
Yeah. Well, we should want to do music, right? And when we aren't wanting to do music, there's a problem. Yeah. Something's out of kilter somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of already brushed on this, but it's just there are things that are out of your control, but there are also so many things that you can do to make a difference on that.
Right.
So
and there's some battles worth fighting. I've had, I think, 16 student teachers during my career, and I would tell them, you got to be like water. And at a certain point, you just have to know when I can't bend anymore. I'm going to break if I keep bending. But you're always going to come across problems. There's never going to be a perfect scenario. And I think sometimes those problems, you can look at them and go, how can I creatively solve this? There's got to be another way. Maybe we could revamp this whole thing because of this scheduling conflict, right?
Yeah, it's almost like a better mindset is instead of how can I avoid having problems, it's how can I be prepared to handle problems when they come.
Right.
Right. Kind of like that mind. It's never going to go away.
Right. I mean, you could have a wonderful lesson plan, bell rings, kids come in, and somebody throws up all over the floor. I mean, it's just stuff that you can't even predict. Or there's a fire drill, or the principal. I mean, just any number. I mean, and there's a million of those. I think sometimes teaching can feel like death by a million paper cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a constant wearing down on you over time. And again, to go back to being a teacher, being vulnerable and being able to trust. Well, when you're beaten down or worn down, it's hard to stay in that space as a teacher. But again, I think teaching is a fantastic profession that needs to be highly regarded, and we need to love on our teachers and support them all in every single way, and let them know how valuable they are to our country, to our society. I mean, really.
For sure. Oh, of course. Well, I think, Kara, you've been at your school for 3 months now or so, and I feel like I've heard a million stories like that already. In just 3 months.
I mean, you exactly saying you have a perfect lesson plan. You can prepare for so much, and I did that a couple days ago, and then I'm in the middle of teaching, and I have 3 administrators walk into my room, the SRO and like the social worker. Hey, we heard that somebody is vaping in your classroom. It's just stuff like that, and so then nuts. After that, they're all the kids are just checked out.
Yeah, you can't get them back.
Can't get them back, right. And it was, what are you gonna do?
It happens.
It's that kind of thing where it's like, okay, thinking on my feet. What can we do to kind of salvage the amount of time that we have left? It may not be what I thought we were gonna do, but let's make something of this time, because that's very disruptive, very disruptive. But that's the life of a teacher in a public school.
That's right.
And I didn't see it happen at all, apparently. It was just hid under their binder. And
oh, wow. Gotta love those binders. Okay, so kind of transitioning out of public teaching. Right. You just kind of stepped out of the public school side of things. So could you tell us a little bit about that and kind of what you're doing now, and and kind of what your mindset was making that change, and what kind of just tell us about that and kind of what that looks like.
It was very hard to make that decision to leave public education. There were many, many, many factors that were at play in making that decision. But ultimately, I was just at that point where I was ready to do something new, was ready to grow. I've got a lot of ideas, right? And needing the space to be able to do that. And sometimes some of our ideas don't always fit inside the paradigm of public education. Yeah. So I really do have a heart for educators. And still for students, very much so. And I'm very creative. I have a lot of ideas of performance ideas that I'd like to see happen. And so I'm currently working with directors around the state and actually other parts of the country too, but working with their groups and helping them get groups kind of like Revolution Strings up and off the ground. I'm also teaching privately during the week, most weeks, and I'm doing a lot more performing too. So it's been exciting. It's been an exciting opportunity to make some needed changes for me.
Very cool. What are some of the the pros and cons that you feel like being in a public school setting versus being kind of on your own, doing your own thing? I mean, do you think it's what does that difference look like?
I think there's value in both, right? Yeah. And sometimes you just gotta go, this is a season for this, and this is a season to make a change, right? Yeah. And I think, one of the benefits of public education is that you get to see those kids every day. And in my situation, I was at both high schools. I got the best of the best in the whole town, and that was always like, man, this is really cool. That was a positive thing. The resources that a public school gives you, like a classroom and and instruments and that sort of thing, is a definite positive thing. On the other end, being rather self-employed, I really like being my own boss. I like my ideas. I like getting to make some of my own things happen on my own time, and not be bound to some of the frustrations of, today we're going to give a test, and so you aren't going to see any of these kids. Just some of those distractions and interruptions that are outside of your control. Seems like those become more and more prevalent as each year goes by. So it's just good for me to take a break from some of that. And it definitely has been a challenge coming out of COVID. I know on the high school level, a lot of students, they had their 1 year of fine arts credits in. And when COVID happened, they're like, why am I going to continue doing this? We're not performing. Yeah. And so a lot of kids quit. And so it's a rebuilding time, and everything's rebuilding, and things are going well, right? But I just thought now would be a good time for me to kind of pivot and point in a different direction. And so, yeah, there's been some positives.
Yeah, for sure.
And some loss. It's hard to walk away from something that you love so much.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean that's really respectable, though. I feel like, I mean that's such a hard thing to do, and especially after teaching for what you said, like
21.
Yeah, 21 years. I mean, especially if that's what you love to do, being able to have the heart and the mind to say, as much as I would be comfortable still doing this,
yes,
it's worth trying new ventures to go even further
right.
than what's possible.
Yeah, this has not been a step towards being comfortable.
Yeah.
Let me say.
Yeah,
There's just a lot of uncertainty, right? And that can be scary.
Mm-hmm.
But we only have one life to live, one precious life, and I just was like, I've got to be brave, and I've got to make a change. So
Yeah.
here we are.
I kind of can relate to that on a kind of a smaller scale. Karen knows about this. The past couple weeks, so I had a new choral piece premiered this past week.
Oh, congratulations!
Yes, thank you. Yes, and it was by the University of Texas Permian Basin Choir.
Wow.
Yeah, down there in Midland, and Frank Eigner, Kara mentioned earlier. He commissioned it from me, and they premiered it, and so
congratulations.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
A big deal.
Oh, for sure. And so they're actually going to be performing it along with some other new music up at National ACDA next semester and in February. And I had this idea, and I thought it over, and I talked to Kara about it, and I prayed about it, and I finally was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do all of this. I still need to work out the details, but I'm doing it. And so I'm going to have a booth at ACDA, like in the convention center in the exhibit hall. And I have never done anything like that before on my own. And I've seen like the exhibit hall at TMEA and all that stuff, but especially for me, since I'm still very small and kind of where I'm at in my journey, and I don't have like a huge library of music, but it was one of those things where I was like, you know what, I think I just need to do this, and I still need to figure out some things along the way,
sure.
but I think it'll be worth it in the end, and it is kind of scary to know, like, all right, I'm going to be in the same room as all these other big publishers and composers doing all these professionals, and I'm really new to the game here, but I'm excited for all the experiences.
I'm excited for you. This is a big, bold move on your part, and something you've never done before, and that takes a lot of guts and a lot of bravery, and wow. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I've been brainstorming a lot of ways I can innovate, I guess you could say, for how I could do things, but more on that later. Once I figure those out.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's great.
Is there anything you just still on your mind that you think would be worth discussing?
I think we covered quite a bit.
Sure, no, of course.
But it really has been a thrill to be able to sit here with both of you in your lovely home and talk about music and music education. And again, I just encourage all the music educators listening. You're doing fantastic, noble work, and you deserve all the support in the world from each other and from those that have gone before you and from your parents and students. Hopefully you all know how valuable your work is. And if I can be of any assistance to anybody listening that's needing some mentorship or some ideas on how to start a group like what I've done, I'm definitely open to helping and consulting and coming and doing workshops and that sort of thing.
Yeah, perfect. And that brings me to my final question. How can people connect with you?
I'm on Facebook at Darcy Radcliffe Music. I'm on Instagram, Darcy Radcliffe Music, and I'm almost have my website up and running. So
perfect. Okay.
That'll be another way eventually too.
Well, once you get that all set up, send it to us, and that will be in the show notes. We'll have all those linked on there. And then Revolution Strings is still up and going strong in Abilene. Is that correct?
For the moment. I don't know that the administration is wanting to continue it.
Sure, gotcha. All righty. Well, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it keeps going on.
Yes.
For sure. All right.
Thank you both.
Of course. Thank you, Darcy.